Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Best Western Novato Oaks Inn for this Candidates Night, sponsored by the Novato Community Alliance. My name is Brent Ainsworth. I'm the editor of Novato Patch, a website that covers Novato. Here we have 6 candidates running for 3 seats on the Novato City Council, and I will start by introducing them closest to me first. Jerome Gigliotti, Madeline Kellner, Eric Lucan, Jean McLeamy, Leslie Peterson-Schwartz, and Eleanor Sluice. Thank you all for coming tonight. Candidate Manny Fernandez elected not to take part in this forum. Just to let you know, he is still on the ballot. The winners in the Novato 8th election will earn a seat alongside the incumbents Denise Athas and Pat Eklund. We will start by allowing the candidates to make opening statements of 2 minutes apiece, and for simplicity's sake, we will start closest to me and work down the line. We'll start with Jerome Gigliotti.
I'm Jerome Gigliotti, and I have a plan for Novato. I have to ask you a few questions. Who is running Novato? For the past 3 years, I have been addressing the City Council, and apparently the City Council is under the impression that Sacramento is running in Novato. According to Dick Spotsworth in the IAJ, now we're going to have the federal government running Novato. So we don't need a City Council. All we have to do is have a rubber stamp here and somebody to do it. We have issues like affordable housing. Affordable housing has been dictated by ABAG in Sacramento, and Novato already has far more than its share of affordable low-income welfare felon housing, and ABAG is forcing more of this on us, and the council has done nothing to resist that. We also have crime in Novato, which nobody's willing to admit. We had a forum last week, and I've been told that when I was mentioning crime in Novato, the other candidates were rolling their eyes. We do have 6 illegal alien gangs in Novato. You can tell because they have the graffiti all over town. We had the attempted murders at Safeway at Nave on January 3rd. Within 24 hours after that, a fence at Bowling was painted with 187, the murder statute for California. The gangs were telling us they can get away with murder. Here they probably can. The police chief and the city does not enforce laws and codes equitably. We have housing in the Cambridge and Monte Maria area where they have people living in garages, and the city code enforcement refuses to do anything about it. Third, we have the city council encouraging people to employ illegal aliens rather than citizens of the United States. We need equal enforcement of laws without race exceptions.
Thank you, Jerome. Madeline Kellner.
Good evening. My name is Madeline Kellner. I've lived 18 years in Novato, raised my family here, and that includes my daughter Laurel, who's in the room today, and my son Mark, who's in the Air Force. Really love the sense of community here, as well as the physical surroundings and all the wonderful things that are available to us in this town. I've been involved in the city and in the community for 15 years of those 18, both in nonprofit board work as well as various city commissions. During the day, I work in the health and human services field, currently running an agency that serves low-income, disabled, and elderly folks, helping them get caregivers so they can stay independently in their homes. I've served for the last 4 years on the City Council, this year as mayor, and the goals that I set out for the last 4 years are ones I think we're going to be continuing to work on in the next 4. And those include having a balanced budget and ensuring that we have vital city services, including public safety, looking at our facilities, making sure that we can upgrade them, and that we get out of rented space and build our own offices so that we can save the city $650,000 a year, working on our downtown, getting our theater up and running, and then partnering with others. We have a good example in the Hamilton Gym that we just broke ground on a couple months ago, where we're working with the city, with the school district, to create a facility. This year as mayor, I've run meetings in a fair and respectful way, made decisions with input from everyone, and really with the idea of what's best for the entire city. There's more work to be done, and I would be honored to serve you for another 4 years.
Thank you, Madeline. Eric Lucan.
Thank you. I also like to thank the Novato Community Alliance for hosting this forum and for all of you for attending tonight. I was born and raised right here in Novato, and I'm proud to say that I'm a product of the public school system here, having graduated from Novato High. Following graduation, I went on to earn my college degree and also my master's degree in business administration from Georgia State University before moving back here to Novato to start my career in marketing. I have years of experience as a small business consultant as well as a marketing manager for a large restaurant franchise. And today I work in San Francisco for Kimpton Hotels, directing our loyalty marketing campaigns. My wife Kylie also grew up here in Novato, and when we decided to settle down and buy a house, the choice was easy. We chose Novato because this is such a great place to live. I grew up here, I benefited from growing up in this community, and I really just have a desire to give back to the community. Over the years, I've been actively involved in our community. Currently, I serve on the Parks and Recreation Commission. I volunteered with the Novato Police Department. I served on the board of the Marin School of the Arts, as well as the Novato Financing Authority, and I was a youth director and coached youth soccer and volleyball right here in Novato. So now I've told you a little bit about myself. Why am I running for the Novato City Council? I really think that it's time for a new perspective and renewed energy at our City Hall. I have a passion for this community, and I want to help shape this community into the future. My priorities are very simple. First is developing a financially sustainable budget that will ensure Novato's long-term viability. Secondly, improving our public safety levels to the level that our residents deserve. And thirdly, repairing our infrastructure, public facilities, and parks through sound fiscal decision-making. Right now, I think we need leaders who will take on the tough issues facing our city, and I have a strong business background that will help me address our difficult budget situation, and I'll also work tirelessly to revive Novato's image, because I really believe that this is the most incredible place to live, and I'm passionate about Novato. I want to continue to give back to the community that I have benefited so much from. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Jean McCleany.
Welcome, everyone. It feels like more of a living room in here than a formal debate or forum. So I appreciate all of you coming, and I really want to thank the Novato Community Alliance for putting this on tonight. I think, we've had months now of discussions about affordable housing, and I think the silver lining for me is that we are all gathered together here today, and we've had a really good opportunity to air a lot of the concerns and issues that we have about mandates coming down from the state, and I think working cooperatively together, we can come up with some really good solutions for Novato. This is an incredible town. I've lived here for 27 years, and just down the road a piece, and have a wonderful family, and I really pride myself in listening carefully and working closely with people to come up with good solutions, listening to all voices, whether they disagree with me or not, and trying to come up with really good solutions to move us forward on many different areas. My key priorities, overarching or priorities that I feel are essential for a safe, vibrant Novato, are fiscal, facilities, and land use priorities. Fiscally, we need a sustainable and responsible budget. Facilities, we need well-maintained and managed facilities. In land use, we need a balance between the environment, neighborhoods, housing, and of course economic development. All of those are key priorities. If you want to have some in-depth information on some of my other issues for the city and some greater understanding, you can go to my website at www.jeanmclaney.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean. Leslie Peterson-Schwartz.
Good evening. The last 3 weeks of the campaign are now upon us, and the world is changing right before our eyes. This past Wednesday, there were 2 stories on the cover of the IJ that have implications for Novato. I've lived here for almost 20 years. We have the same infrastructure problems of any town in the height of a very deep recession. What is unique about Novato is that we have historically been the affordable town in Marin. This is where folks move so they can be stay-at-home moms. This is where many of San Francisco's police and firefighters live. We are an incredibly diverse community with doctors and lawyers living in the same neighborhoods as teachers and truck drivers. Novato is at risk of losing its small town character because of mandates that appear we have no control over. I don't believe that. I have 12 years experience in an elected capacity as a school board member, and I'm fortunate to have served in a statewide capacity. My experience with Sacramento would be an asset to Novato. What I know from my Sacramento experience is that state mandates are subject to interpretation. What brought Novato out in droves in June of 2010 was a plan that was easiest for the city staff. What we must always strive for is what is best for our community as a whole. I have intentionally chosen to handle my campaign as a true grassroots effort without a professional political consultant or any of the trappings that come with traditional politics. I've refused endorsements from organizations and any elected officials in order to stay true to the grassroots philosophy. My campaign is not about liberal or conservative, Republican or Democrat. My campaign is about awake or asleep. We cannot wait for the state to send us mandates. It puts us in a reactive and defensive position. We need to be proactive about our destiny through thoughtful, long-range decision-making. I have the track record and leadership and experience to do that. I've lived all over the country, and therefore I have a perspective of how wonderful this place is and how much I appreciate that this is where I have chosen to live after having been everywhere else. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Eleanor Sluice.
Thank you, and thanks for putting on this. My name's Eleanor Sluice, and I've been here almost 20 years, actually. I used to about 24 years and living in Southern Marin. But we have three issues. It's all about the budget, safety, and housing. Do we want to bloom and grow? Do we want to be like packed sardines? And are we going to provide safety for our children? I was part of the Vision Strategic Oversight Planning Committee for 2 years. And we had worked on that and then put out this vision plan for small town feel, for protection of our children, our citizens, and also to have a balanced budget, the economics. The first big issue actually of those three, budget, housing, and safety. The first one is how to have a beneficial budget that fits into our pocketbooks. This means we have to look at redevelopment money of administering more than $60 million. I don't think everybody's aware of that. And using some of that money for our city budget, because redevelopment money in Redevelopment 101 may be used for libraries, parks, museums, and any other facilities except city offices. This means that the cost of our town's vision of keeping it as a small town is going to fall on us. This means we need to change the direction of our spending plans. And I'm for team effort. I'm for working together. Together, it's a big issue that we need a new team on the council. The next big issue, I won't have enough time to talk about it, but it's going to be about the new building, and then of course safety and housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. So we're going to move right into the questions that have been submitted by the public. A preview of this event was published on Novato Patch, and we asked the public to go ahead and share their questions that we could ask at this forum. And after we go through these questions, as time permits, we'll open it up to questions from this audience in here. And for each question, we'll have a maximum of 90 seconds for answers. I'd like to start with the issue of housing. The first question is a general inquiry. Do you believe that high-density housing has a place in Novato? And do you see the city as suburban or metropolitan? And let's start with Madeline Kellner.
Thank you, Jerome. High-density housing is not something that I think we want to have in Novato, and I think a lot of the challenge is to describe what high density means, and I think that's been a challenge all along. I think what we did this last July in what we came up with in terms of sites and recommendations was to look at the default density of what we would call suburban, which is 20 units per acre. So I think that's what we feel is more consonant with Novato, and in talking to some of the people in the affordable housing world and others, they feel that that's also probably a good match for Novato. So I think what's cut out for us as we write our housing element will be for us to write a good analysis for why that level of density is appropriate for Novato. So that's incumbent upon us as that housing element is written to explain why that will work for us. And that's what's ahead of us, and I'm optimistic that we'll be able to do that.
Thank you, Madeline. Eric Lucan.
Just to take a step back with affordable housing, over the years, Novato really has made great strides with regards to affordable housing. In Hamilton, our redevelopment agency was the only redevelopment agency in the state to commit 100% of the proceeds from the bonds to affordable housing. However, I really think that the current system is broken. When you look at it, you have mandates that come from the state, but at the same time, we have the state that's coming in the back pocket of the general fund and taking away resources that are necessary to provide services to the residents that we're expected to provide zoning for. So I think that the system as a whole is broken. That being said, it is important for us to move forward with our housing element, and I am in favor of the 20 units per acre. I do not believe that 30 units per acre is really in line with many of the neighborhoods in our community. So along the question about whether or not we should be suburban, absolutely we should be suburban, which would lower our default density to 20 units an acre. Fortunately, it's not something that we can change, but I do believe that as we write the housing element, as we prepare it, there are ways that we can work within that 20 units per acre, which is much more in line with some neighborhoods in our community. So that's what I would be in favor of.
Thank you, Eric. Jean McClamey.
Thank you. I believe that affordable housing should be scattered, not clustered. I believe that what the state has mandated in their clustered housing is discriminatory, putting all very low and low-income people all together. Those kinds of projects don't work unless you have really good management. And we've seen a couple of examples, bad examples, of where the management hasn't been good in Novato, but we've seen some good examples too with some of our senior housing, and even New Beginnings is great, Next Key. But I believe that you shouldn't have high density housing here in Novato, either affordable or non-affordable. And I would say that what we have is an inclusionary housing ordinance in Novato, where 20% of market rate units need to be affordable. That's the way to scatter it. And everybody can bring each other up that way. I worked closely with council colleague Denise Athis to take all the information that came out of the city manager's housing committee, and as well as discussing with owners of land and neighborhoods, and we came up with a plan that was 20 units an acre and that had the least impact on neighborhoods and had the most opportunity to have senior housing. And I believe that we should either have 20 or less, unless there is, say, senior housing that could be an opportunity to have greater density. But all in all, it needs to be compatible with our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Leslie.
Well, by the time you get this far down the line, it's kind of one of those ditto kind of things. But I would like to add that the reason this happened to begin with is that the default density for us, based on our metropolitan designation, which is purely because we're a county that's next to a city, that's how they defined that. Didn't matter there was a bridge and some water you had to get across to get over here. It's just what happens if you're next to a big city. But we had a default density of a minimum of 30 with bonuses for higher than that because of our relationship to being near a big city. We are the furthest out town in that county, and we have always been a bedroom community. It was designed to be a bedroom community. So turning it into something that's metropolitan is just cattywampers for us. But it does mean that every time we go through this, we have to be prepared that this is going to be an argument, because you have to justify, you can do this, they're not saying you can't, but it's much easier and there are fewer hurdles that you have to go through. And in fact, there's tons of incentives to go with the default density that's provided by the state. So we just have to all be prepared that we're going to sacrifice collectively to make sure that we roll up our sleeves and do it right the way we want it done, and then justify what we've done. Because we can do 20, they never said we couldn't, but it's way easier to go with the program they provide.
Thank you, Leslie. Eleanor?
Yes, and I agree with Leslie about keeping low density, because it is going to come back to us. We don't know whether the state will accept it or not, and some of the incumbents are being backed by the county for high density. They're being backed by the big builders. I am not backed by any of those people because they know I am for low density. This means that we need a plan. We need a better team on the council to plan in case this comes back. What are we going to do about this? Because we can't even do the general plan or do the Redwood Boulevard plan until we get our housing down. What is acceptable? What is not acceptable? 20 units, basically, we could have gone to 14 units and probably still have set that in. Because if the council reneges and doesn't do what the community wants, then we will have another issue. So part of this goes with zoning. And Jerome is an attorney, because like thinking with the zoning, do we really have to rezone? At what point are we losing control of our land, our residents, and all of a sudden being told you have to rezone for high density? So this is going to be a big issue. That's the state plan. We have to go okay, against TAM, transportation, it's connected.
Thanks, Eleanor. Jerome, you can take one more.
I believe that Novato is suburban. Everyone sitting in this room knows that it's suburban. There are even small areas outside the city limits that are downright rural. The reason that we're classified as metropolitan is not because we're next to San Francisco. It's because Assemblywoman Torres of Pomona says that this is the way it's going to be. They told our Assemblyman, Mr. Huffman, that that's the way it's going to be. I believe that high-density housing in Novato should be 4 acres, 4 units per acre, and 2 is preferable. The incumbents in the city council have bent over a barrel and said, yes, master, give me one more, because they have done nothing to contradict the affordable housing that's been crammed down our throat by ABAG and Sacramento. We already have in Novato 30% of the population of Marin County and 50% of the low-income welfare felon housing. We don't need any more. We need to start saying no.
Thank you, Jerome. No doubt Novato went through a very steep learning curve with the subject of affordable housing over the past 16 months or so. The housing element of the general plan is moving along now in the process, and specific sites have been named. And what I'd like to ask the candidates is, what have you learned about our city in that span of time, and what is the next step for the city if the state rejects the housing element? Let's start with Eric Lucan.
I think one thing that we've all learned as a community is the importance of communication and getting together long before the process is even getting off the ground, and to come together, to hear one another out, to talk over the issues before we rush to make a decision. I heard this great analogy I've been sharing. It's an analogy of 2 individuals that were fighting over an orange, and they both adamantly wanted the orange. And finally a mediator came in and just cut the orange in half and gave each party half of the orange. Well, that didn't make anybody happy, because one person just wanted the juice from the orange and the other party just wanted the peel from the orange. And had they talked together in the beginning, they could have realized that they could have made everybody happy and satisfied everybody if they had just come together from the beginning. Now, if only affordable housing in this debate were so easy in our community. And we know that it's not. We know that we weren't going to be able to reach a solution that's going to make everybody happy. But I think what we learned, and what we'll always have moving forward, is the more that we bring individuals together, we talk over the issues, we get the community involved, we clearly communicate, and we're transparent, then we are going to be able to come up with a solution that nobody will ever say that's the best solution, but we might be able to have a solution everybody say, you know what, I can live with that. That will work. It's not my preference, but you know what, I can work with that. And I think that's what's so important. I think that's what makes Novato so great, that you know, as difficult as the process was, it brought people out, it got people talking about things, and hopefully moving forward we can make even better decisions in the future.
Thank you, Eric. Jean.
Yes, what we know is that every time we had a new development in a neighborhood, the neighbors came out in droves to protest whatever it happened to be. And with this housing element with the state finally dictating that we had to identify by parcel number where our affordable housing could go if a developer happened to come by, it created a firestorm all over the city, because we had many neighborhoods then that were impacted by state mandates, or potentially impacted by state mandates. So what it did, it brought a lot of people out. We finally were no longer alone in the council chambers. We had 300 or so people coming down, being very upset, because when you hit people in the pocketbook or hit their property, they're going to be quite angry. And they were taking it out on the council, who they didn't know. They didn't trust us. Some of them still don't. It takes a long time to build trust. So we learned, I believe, to work more cooperatively. We have more to go on that. We learned that we can draw the line and make a lower proposal to the state. I believe they're going to accept it, but I think we need to work collaboratively with other cities, as Huffman has proposed as well, and we need to come up with a really good plan to go to the state and tell them that one size does not fit all. Novato is unique, as are other cities, and we'll no longer take their restrictions that are so restrictive.
Thank you, Jean.
90 seconds isn't long enough for this one. Okay, so first of all, I'm not sure about collaborating at this point, because frankly I think we have done so much more than our fair share for the county. I would like them to collaborate a little bit with us. So until the quotas, because that's really what it looks like for someone in my seat who's in a community where we're being put at risk by everybody else in the county and they're not. And if you do the spread, look at the numbers, we are the best. We get an A+ gold star for how we've behaved with this. We've taken more than our fair share. So collaboration starts with everybody else ponying up to the table. Second thing I've learned is this is not a matter of communication, because this started with design review, fell apart there. Went to the Planning Commission, got scrapped the first time. Went back again, that brought 400 people out that year. So then they decided, okay, throw it off on an ad hoc group. This is not a solution by passing it around and thinking that eventually we're going to go away. Because when your house is what's at risk, you don't go away. You may move away, but you aren't going to go away if you're still here. So it didn't work to keep passing it along. The other thing that I think is real important is next time out, because we get these allocations every cycle, is do not put off the one you don't want to do the most to the end. Because that's what we did this time. We had the allocations, they're set up in ratios. Extremely low income was put off because you know what? Doing market rate is easy. Nobody fights you on that. I mean, yes, we do, it's true, but that's the easy one.
Thank you, Leslie. Eleanor.
Thank you, and I agree with Leslie. What have I learned? I learned to really even appreciate Novato more. I moved here to retire in 1992, and in the last 10 years I have been retired. So I have time to work on this, because we're going to have a new team, and that's what I'm learning, a new team to advocate for Novato's plan, not the county's plan for extreme high density and rezoning, not the state's plan for extreme high density and rezoning, and certainly not the transportation plan for extreme high density. Novato has done its share. You all know that. We've worked hard. We have done our share. It's time to take care of the people in Novato. And because we don't have the resources, if we had the resources, it might be different. But our budget is broken, and we need planning for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Jerome.
The constitutional concept of a general plan is that the general plan is the property of the community. It's intended for the community to be able to preserve its community values and plan for the future. ABEG and the state and now the federal government has taken our general plan away from us, and they're shoving their ideals down our throat. I've been saying this for 3 years. Finally, somebody's listening. We have the right to preserve our community values. What the state wants and what the federal government now wants is for Novato to look exactly like Pomona and Richmond and Antioch. And we already have Bay Vista. We have low-income housing at Bay Vista that the tenants, 3 of the tenants have defaulted, and the city has bought back their properties. There are another 6 who want to default and have the city buy back their properties. Council member Dylan Knutson has a friend living at Bay Vista. She says that she's elderly and she's afraid to go out of her unit. These are not low-income, high-density housing. This is welfare felon housing. Mayor McLeamy has admitted that at Bay Vista they could not fill the units and had to advertise in the East Bay for people to come here and live in our low-income housing. We don't need any more of that. We don't need this to look like Pomona. Assemblywoman Torres of Pomona has a city of 150,000 and 55% are non-English speaking. That's what she wants Novato to look like. I want Novato to look like what it did when I came here in 1971.
Thank you, Jerome. Madeline.
Well, we really did learn a lot from this experience, and that is that in 2003, the last time the housing element was done, nobody showed up. And in part, it was because the rules were different then. Then you didn't have to pick sites, you didn't have to rezone. Well, that all changed. It all changed when we had to do our next housing element. Yet, I don't think we were prepared for that. One of the things that I've done is I've talked to San Rafael about their approach. And they took a lot of time up front to really work with each one of their neighborhoods and their communities before they even started looking at sites. So it was a little bit of the go slow to go fast. They now have an element almost approved, and by the way, they have to come up with 900 units in their plan, but they're very close to getting their plan approved. So I think there's some things that we can learn from how others approach it. I think that we have done some work with Jared Huffman. We did support the AB 01103 bill that was going to help around the density issue. We're ready to go back again. There's a letter that just came back from the HCD, which is the Housing Community Development Department, where they're seriously looking at some of the things that were suggested by Jared. So we're not done yet. We're going to continue to work with Jared and also with the League of California Cities, and I've initiated some conversations with them so we can work in partnership.
Thank you so much. Since we're on a roll with housing, why don't we continue? As you can imagine, we got a lot of questions about housing. This is a fresh question. This one is pretty recent. The County of Marin was recently examined by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development and entered into a voluntary agreement to correct some practices, some might call them lapses, that were considered to be possible violations of fair housing law. This process involved holding hearings with people who might be considered at risk of discrimination, and a new plan was devised. This implementation plan appears to affect both the unincorporated areas of the county and the incorporated areas of the county. What do you think of what's being called the analysis of impediments to fair housing? Let's start with Jean.
Well, what I understand is that the county was out of compliance in terms of fair housing, and fair housing is different than affordable housing. Fair housing, as I understand, I'm not an expert, is that there is no discrimination in terms of your gender or your ethnicity, whether you have blue eyes, green eyes, red eyes, and apparently the county was found to be out of compliance with these fair housing laws. It is not to affect our RENA numbers. That's what they tell us. We've got to be vigilant, make sure that's not the case. But the idea with fair housing is that it be available to all without discrimination if they qualify. And I think that's been the big problem in the past, that the qualifications standards were lowered, so people didn't have to have a job, they didn't have to have the money for a down payment, and nor did they have the skills to be homeowners, and so we ended up with a real problem. So I think the county, and repeat that question one more time. I want to make sure I got it all. I got 2 seconds to finish.
Yeah, it was just about what do you think of what's being called the analysis of impediments. I think it's just basically county versus city.
Right. So the county, we do have a representative from our council on that committee, and my time is up.
Thank you, Jean. Leslie.
Well, based on, I don't have a great understanding of this because I was not involved in what was going on. However, I'm very worried about the county and how they expect us to handle what they classify as their problem with a decision that they basically will hand over to us, where most of the housing is handled in the incorporated areas, but they've made the decision on our behalf without our input. We did not have input. We had a representative there, that's true. But if you look at how they're shifting what the obligation was, it's one thing to say people may have been discriminated against in housing. It's another thing to turn around and say, okay, we expect you to build high-density apartments in every neighborhood in your town. I don't see the relationship between those two issues. I don't. I understand that people might have been discriminated against, and that is wrong. But I do not understand how that turns into we have to build apartments that are high-density apartments in our existing neighborhoods. I don't see the relationship. I do see a pattern, though, from HUD, because frankly, in Westchester County, New York, they faced a similar issue where they had to have court-ordered housing built. True, they did what they were asked to do, and then it was, oh gee, now that you have it built, we expect you to absolutely do no credit checks when you do bank loans for people to buy this housing. That's a different scenario than asking to have the housing built. You can't keep changing the rules and the bar for us.
Thank you, Leslie. Eleanor.
Thank you. From what I understand is the county needs to find, and it has, 15 sites to build low-income housing on them. One of the sites, I think it's number 6 or could be number 15, is an overlay on top of the mobile homes over at Atherton, and that's been designated as one of the sites. So it comes down that Novato might be impacted by the closeness of high-density housing in the county, which means our schools and our streets will all be impacted. How to change that, we are going to have to work with the county. And the biggest issue from this report was that there's not enough diversity. There needs to be a change in more minority groups into the area. And part of the problem with that is it doesn't matter because we don't have the jobs. Just adding housing and no jobs and not having resources to help the people and their children who are planning to come in here is ridiculous, because we would need the college to start having different kinds of classes, more vocational training in biology, sociology, and to raise the bar to get people off of this low-income housing. So it just doesn't perpetuate itself.
Thank you, Eleanor. Jerome.
Listen to what HUD is saying. They're changing the rules because in Marin County there might be a risk of discrimination. That's 2 hypotheticals. I was an adult in the 1960s. I know what redlining is. Realtors used to carve up their map and only sell to particular races in particular areas. There is no redlining in Marin County. Every realtor who has a license in Marin County wants to sell to anyone. We don't care what race they are. In Novato, we already have diversity. If you don't believe there's diversity in Novato, drive your car around the streets. We have diversity. What they're doing is, in 1964, we had a Civil Rights Act that mandated that there be no discrimination based upon race. What HUD and the feds are doing is saying, yes, you have to discriminate on the basis of race, because if you don't, we won't have our quotas. Quotas don't work. HUD is shoving this down our throats. HUD is an agency that does not even obey its own rules. The HUD mandate is that if one of their HUD tenants is convicted of a crime, they must be evicted. HUD refuses to divulge what convicted felons they have in their housing and who they've evicted, even though it's public record. HUD wants us to give the loans to anybody and everybody, even if they don't qualify. We've already had a home loan disaster.
Thank you, Jerome. Madeline, can we were going to be playing musical microphone chairs here. Let's pass. I think Jerome and I will have a little tea party with the microphone, but otherwise, thank you. Madeline, go ahead.
The whole issue about this analysis of impediments is a very different, I don't want to call it a project, but it's a very different thing than coming up with a housing element. And the county does still need to come up with their own housing element around affordable housing, but this was an entirely different issue. It was really around fair housing laws. And just to give you an example, one of the things that is done in any community is that there are audits done where people do, it's kind of like my daughter once was involved in going to places trying to buy cigarettes, basically, you know, kind of a sting operation to see if they would sell her cigarettes as underage. Well, the same thing happens with fair housing, where people call, they might say, I have a child, or they might say I'm disabled, or I'm a single mom. I mean, it covers a lot of different categories, and that's really what apparently was found, is those kinds of issues. So it really doesn't have anything to do with where it's built or anything like that. It's just that any of us, no matter what we have, would not be discriminated against that's in one of those categories. So I think that's really what the purpose of this report was all about. We did have Denise Athas serving on that committee. It is somewhat complex, but that's really what that's all about.
Thank you, Madeline. Eric?
I know this question came up most likely because of Dick Spotwood's article in Sunday, and I know it's brought a lot of questions, and I know a lot of people have read the article. I encourage you to also read the actual analysis of impediments report. It's about 48 pages and made good reading on my commute home today. But I encourage you to read through this. There's some very good findings in here. There are some findings in here that are somewhat ambiguous to what is this going to mean to the local jurisdictions. And I think because of that, it's important for us as a city of Novato to look at those possible ambiguities, maybe bring together the working group, maybe bring together the city council, go through those and potentially write a letter. In fact, this came out of the staff report. It says, this is from page 4, the county has received comments from Corte Madera Town Council, a copy of which is attached. The town is concerned that the analysis of impediments represents an unfunded mandate which could affect the cities. No other cities or towns have submitted comments to the county in response to the priority setting committee's motion. So I think it's important, if we have concerns, that we need to let our concerns be known. I think that's very important, and not necessarily overreact to an article in the IJ, but to send in our reactions to the actual report. So that's something that I certainly would be in favor of, because if it affects the cities and most importantly, our budget, which we know is a big issue, we need to be aware of it. So that's my 2 cents on the issue.
Thank you, Eric. Okay. Certainly we could go through site by site, but on the housing element, but I think what we're going to do is spare everybody. And Just talk about the biggest one. There's a piece of property about 2 miles north of the downtown area that is, it's known as Black John Road. It's on the base of, it'd be the eastern face of Mount Burdell, and the nice slope along there. If elected, and if a developer were to step up and be willing to develop that property, would you vote for 60 to 100 units at that site, which would account for quite a bit, at least a third of the quota? Let's start with, was it Leslie? Yes.
It's my turn. So you're basically asking whether I would agree to what the housing element that they just did this summer has in it.
I believe that's what the questioner was getting at.
Undoing what we just had them decide to do. That's a good question. So the thing that concerns me actually is that there was not one opportunity at that point for anyone from that area, the Wood Hollow area, to step in. It came as a surprise that night. And the one thing that people out there are already worried about is what happens when they get a SMART train station. And the reason they're worried about it is because SMART hasn't figured out, being as smart as they are, how to get a bus down there and get a bus back out. So they've even talked about having a roundabout out past the corner of San Marin and Redwood Boulevard. And when we asked, you know, did you talk to the neighbors about a roundabout? And they said, no, but what's not to love about a roundabout? So the concern I have is that we didn't really ever hear from that community. I know that this is just the beginning of the process, but without having the community weigh in their neighborhood, it's just, gee, whoever didn't show up is odd man out. They're the ones who get stuck. And so I don't know what I would do faced with that, because I think it's really wrong that that community didn't have the same opportunity the rest of us had to go at a meeting week after week for the whole year.
Thank you, Leslie. Eleanor.
Yeah, if I were just given this cold, which I am given, there are too many unanswered questions, because one of the things with that site, it's an environmentally, it's an environmental issue. That area could be zoned for, or have liquefaction for earthquake issues. So we don't know how many units could be on that. We don't know from, like at the Atherton Ranch, they put in the Nova Road, they put in low cost housing towards the front, and then as you bump it up towards the back, and it's still, you have to save the hillside, that then you put in more expensive homes. So how many $1 million homes will go there? How many 500,000? How many 200,000? How many townhomes? We don't have those answers yet. So what are the economic impacts of that on the city? We don't have that. And what are the social, cultural impacts from the different diverse groups? Because obviously we will be asked to have, again, a wide diversity, which we're already, like in 10 years, it's going to be 50-50% of different colors.
Thank you, Eleanor. Jerome.
High density housing at Black John Road? No. If the state wants us to have an additional 660 units of high density housing, what we need to do is buy the lot next to Nancy Pelosi's lot and build it out at 660 units per acre. That's, if the federal government and the state wants to impose upon us race-based, welfare felon quota housing, they should know where they're going to get it.
Thank you, Jerome. Madeline.
Well, I think what we had recommended when we came up with the sites was senior housing, actually, on that site. Right now, that site is zoned light industrial office, so it would need to be rezoned. I think there's some interest in having that perhaps be a mixed use situation there with some office. Right up the hill from there is the Buck housing. So there will be other housing in that area. So I think the conversation around transportation and how it links will be important considerations. Another point that people might not be aware of is that the entrance to Olin Poly State Park is slated to actually go up Redwood. So down the road, when more work is done around the Narrows, that will be the entrance. So there will be, perhaps some transit options going up that way. So, I think I would certainly entertain the project if it came forward down the road. Another critical element will be the siting, where you site the different pieces of it. I know in talking to some folks that live up in Partridge Knolls, they're concerned about looking down on it, what it looks like, so I think there's a number of considerations that would need to go into account for us to be able to evaluate that site.
Thank you, Madeline. Eric?
Yeah, well, with regards to that site, as a challenger, it'd be very easy for me to say, no, I wouldn't do it and just blame a previous council for having passed it, but that would be the wrong thing to do. We went through months and months and months of very difficult discussions. We had working group, we had city council meetings, we had sites that were recommended, and if it moves forward and the housing element is approved with that site and a development comes forward, then it is important for, as a council, to move forward with that project. To not do so, there's some very serious repercussions that could happen if you don't move forward. That being said, I think there is a lot that we can do with any project that does come forward. First of all, as the council is already doing, I think that we need to continue to do is learn from the mistakes we've made with affordable housing in Novato, because everybody knows we've made mistakes with affordable housing. However, we also need to learn from the successes we've made with affordable housing, because there are successes all around this community as well. Successes of projects that don't even come up when we talk about affordable housing because they're not even on anybody's radar. We need to learn what we did right, what we did wrong, how can we implement those at any new locations that we have so that we have strong management in place. We talked a lot about senior housing. We know there's a very strong need for senior housing in Novato, so what can we do to make that site most ideal for that type of housing? Those are the types of decisions that I would look towards making if it ever came forward.
Thank you, Eric. Jean?
Yes, when we came up with their housing element numbers, the housing, city manager's housing group had come up with about 360 units. The state was requiring us to have 200. So when we collaborated to come up with the numbers and the locations for these affordable housing sites, we said, well, let's shoot for 200. That's what we need. We also said, let's shoot for 20 units an acre because that's the suburban density. We also said, where can we have the best chance of doing senior housing? Because that is the least problematic in terms of management and having a project be successful. There's still all the other issues of needing to change the state mandates and all that kind of stuff. But going forward in this window of time, this is what we had to do. So we found a developer that owns the Black John property. He wants to do senior housing. He wants to do a mix of income levels so he can have some folks on Social Security that don't have big incomes that can live there, and then others that can have market rate housing. I believe he's also indicated that he'd collaborate with the Buck Institute to have really good design. They've come up with kind of a village step down the hill kind of concept. He would collaborate with them and then also perhaps have a shuttle together. So I think there's some really positive aspects of that, but we need to continue to collaborate with neighbors to make sure that there's the least impact. But we felt that this was one site that would have the least impact of all.
Okay, thanks very much. I'd like to switch gears just a little bit. There's still a housing element to this next question, but it's a little more about business development. The North Redwood Boulevard corridor, I think we'll be hearing about that in the next session of the council, the next 4 years. I'd like to ask whether you favor a mixed-use approach to the development there. This would be for Eleanor.
Yeah. At this point, I am not sure, because I think until we get our housing plan back from the state, it's going to determine what we do. And it depends a lot on what the commercial people want. We have to work with them, the businesses. I have no idea what the chamber wants. I don't know what the builders want. I don't know what the realtors want. So, but how can we do this if we are mandated to have housing? Because if we're going to have 2 stories, will it then be bumped up to 3 stories? Will there be setbacks? We have to look at design for Redwood Boulevard with a commercial. My preference actually is to hire somebody from the American Institute of Architecture, because they will do an economic study and they can look at the area and see where the business is, because the last thing we want is to take businesses away from the downtown. Peeney's is still vacant. We could even put the public works there and buy it. We could switch property. We have a lot of options. So mixed use is just one option that we can go with.
Thank you, Eleanor. Jerome.
There are 3 candidates for City Council who believe that the solution to everything is build, build, build. I do not want to develop the North Redwood Corridor. I do not want to invest money in it. What I want to do is promote Grand Avenue. The city gives $100,000 a year to the Chamber of Commerce to promote and market Novato. That money goes to them without an exception. What we need to do is find more civic and retail groups around Novato to take some share of that $100,000 and do the development. I believe that we need to put money into Grand Avenue before we put money into the North Redwood Corridor.
Thank you, Jerome. Madeline?
Well, one of the sites we picked is right behind Trader Joe's. So we've already put ourselves out there in terms of having that be one of the sites. And one of the things we wanted to do was to really look at how that really integrates. And so in our recommendation was the idea that we would do some site planning to figure out how that housing would integrate, how many stories, all of that. I think I would be open to looking at mixed use. I know there was a lot of dialogue in the work that the North Redwood Corridor working group did as part of the general plan. I think it's time to get that work going again so that we can look at different options. I think we have many more people that are interested now than were last time. You know, that whole piece of property across the street, the Dan Saphir property. So I think that we'll have a different lens to look at it this time than we did last time. I can say, however, that one of the things that we learned from a forum that was done in February of 2010 with a bunch of people that are involved in mixed use and people involved in the Hamilton property over here, and that is that you kind of have to watch the timing of what you do, because if you start out with housing and then you try to put retail in, people aren't going to want to have the retail. So I think the timing and how that integrates will be really critical.
Thank you, Madeline. Eric?
I think we need to be very wise in how we address the North Redwood Corridor. When you look at Novato as a whole, 5% of our land is zoned commercial, where Petaluma and San Rafael are 11% and 17%. So we have very little land available that's commercially zoned. And you see all the time, and maybe you're a resident yourself, that you're just going to Petaluma or going to San Rafael for certain shopping needs. So I think we need to be careful in how we address that piece of land. I think there are situations where mixed use can work there, but I would not be in favor of mandating a certain number of units there, just as I would not be in favor of mandating it absolutely has to be commercial. I think we need to look at what could go in there, how could it work with the rest of the community, how could it possibly be a way to get individuals off of 101 that don't normally come to Novato. They're now coming into the Novato, maybe for shopping. They're going on to downtown, and it's helping to create this vibrancy that we need in that downtown area so bad. So could mixed use work? Absolutely, but I would not be in favor of a specific mandate that we have to put a certain number of units there. I'd rather keep it open and see what's gonna fit best there to enhance our community.
Thank you, Eric. Jean?
Yes, thank you. Whatever we do there needs to be successful. And what we do know, we have allocated, that's one of the sites where we allocated some mixed use east of Trader Joe's. But we have to be really careful with mixed use. There have been some failures. Windsor is a good example where they created a town square, they created small shopping below and housing above. The shops all went bankrupt because there was no anchor. the people that live up above didn't like all the people coming down for the activities on the green. And so you get people that have a pride of ownership, and they don't want a bunch of people hanging out and garbage trucks going by at 4 in the morning or so forth. So mixed use in our suburban areas don't always work. It didn't work in Windsor. Petaluma, the developers that did the mixed use up there say they'll never do it again. And San Jose has had its problems too. So we also know that Novato isn't going to have any redevelopment dollars to apply to the North Redwood Corridor, because the state is shutting us down most likely, so we won't have the redevelopment dollars like we did for downtown. We invested about $12 million in our downtown on Grant Avenue to enhance it, and it's really looks great. So whatever we do, we have to make sure that it's right for our community, and it will never be big box. Maybe some mixed use is possible, but if it's not going to be successful, then we need to think twice about doing it.
Thank you, Jean. Leslie?
I think in the fact that we're in an incredible recession right now, the notion that if we build it, they will come is really not one we need to be worried about. We need to focus on Grant Avenue right now. I personally, I have to admit, before I ran for city council, it was not my go-to place for shopping. That's just the truth. But since I started doing this, I started going down and talking to people. I have not met one shopkeeper who still has an operating successful business who believes that it's a good idea to do anything with the North Redwood Corridor, because it will kill them more than Vintage Oaks did. That almost killed them, and now if you add the perpendicular street, which by the way, geographically is an old highway. It's very difficult. How we're going to construct this and what it looks like, I wish everybody the best of luck with the plans. But if we go forward now, planning on that, while we leave those shop owners who have done their best to stay in business right now, and anybody here who wants Novato to survive better get out there and at least go buy a cookie, okay? Go downtown, talk to people. Because when we get told over and over there's no parking issue, all you have to do is talk to the shop owners. They believe they're living on another planet, a separate reality, because their reality is not the reality the city is going forward with for them. And no, we don't owe it all to them, but by golly, we have to think about what we already have and sustain that before we go forward with something new.
Thank you, Leslie. Okay, so move on to the next question. I'm going to ask about transportation, and I'm going to start with Jerome here. There's something called the Sonoma Marin Area Rail Transit. Are we all familiar? It is a controversial subject for many folks. As you might recall, there is a smart station planned in Hamilton, and that is, as of right now, to be the only station in Novato. My question for the candidates, not my question, the question from the public, is if SMART down the line does come up for the funding for a second station in Novato, should it be at the San Marin Drive, the spot that's right next to Highway 1, designated previously as the second station, or should it be reconsidered as a downtown station? We'll start with Jerome.
SMART is a good idea. We've been talking about heavy rail transit in Marin since 1969, when the Marin County withdrew from BART because they didn't want those people coming here by train. The gangplank theory. The only problem with SMART, there are two things that are problems with SMART, not just one, there are two. One is the sales tax has not put in the revenue we anticipated because of the disastrous economy since 2007. The other is that after we implemented SMART, the state said, oh well, you've got a rail transit system, we're going to impose upon you 2,100 people per station for low-income, high-density housing. You think I like high-density, low-income housing? Anyone here? No. We need to get away from these state butts. You can have a station but. As for the train station in Novato, I don't know why we don't have a train station at Vintage Oaks. If you had a train station in Vinton Oaks, it would draw people from San Rafael, from Petaluma to come down there, shop, leave their sales tax dollars here, and go back home very easily.
Thank you, Jerome. Madeline?
Well, we voted on these stations, I think it was in 2009, and we looked at the number of people that would use it downtown, the number of people who would use it at Atherton, and it was kind of a wash. But one of the things about Atherton was the fact that you do have jobs there, and you do have people coming down from Sonoma County. And getting them off the road and getting them on a train made a lot of sense. I happen to be the lone vote for the downtown station, but I supported what the majority decided. Given that there has been a delay, there may be a potential for us to look at this again. However, I think the main thing we need to do is to keep working on getting that other station, because one of the things that really strikes me with our town is that it's 8 miles from Hamilton. I live in San Marin, 8 miles from one end to the other. And for us to only have one station right now really doesn't make a lot of sense. If I were to go north, I'd have to drive all the way to Hamilton to get a train to go north. So I think we need to have a station, at least, you know, in the northern part of our city. And the fact that we have jobs there, I think, needs to be factored in, not just housing, but the fact we have jobs at the northern end of town. So I'm hoping that we'll get the revenues so that we can have that station in the northern part of our city.
Thank you, Madeline. Eric?
Well, first of all, with regards to SMART, I'm a very strong believer in public transportation. I ride Golden Gate Transit into San Francisco every single day, and I know there's a lot of concerns about SMART as a whole. I really do hope that it is a success, that we can get the stations. I really hope for both stations. But I believe the Atherton station would be the best one if we had to choose between the two. Just logistically speaking, I think it makes sense to pick the farthest south and the farthest north ones for Novato. Infrastructure-wise, if we're ever in a position to be able to partly fund a station, I think the downtown station, because some of the infrastructure we already have there, would be the most cost-efficient method. So if we had to pick one and then hope to get one in the future, I think the best chance is with downtown. So I would certainly be in favor of staying with Atherton as was decided upon.
Thank you, Eric. Jean?
Yes, thank you. I have supported SMART because I believed we needed an alternate 101 route. I was displeased with not only the decline in revenue, we couldn't help that, but with the apparent mismanagement, and I'm really pleased that Farhad Mansourian now is in charge and the general manager. He's a public works director, he's running it as a public works project, and I think it has great potential to be very successful, although it's shorter. But he sees it being done in stages, and that's how public works projects are brought in successfully. The reason we went for the Atherton station over the downtown is because of the jobs, as has been mentioned. Also, there was going to be a potential development up there with even more jobs and a possible hotel. Parking wasn't, housing wasn't going to be a big issue on that because there was housing in some of the other stations that would mitigate our not having those gazillion number of units at that station. The problem with the downtown site is there wasn't going to be adequate parking. We felt there would be a real impact there, and people would need to be shuttled. That being said, I think it would be wonderful to have a downtown station. We've been trying for years, the city has, to wrestle that station away from SMART so that we can refurbish the station and rebuild the depot into some really wonderful little restaurant, or bookstores don't work anymore, but something really to enhance the downtown that anchors that in. So in the meantime, we are trying to negotiate with SMART to get some use of their parking area for our downtown.
Thank you, Jean. Leslie?
I think that at least for the end of town I live on, and I do live on the end that would get the new station, once we found out that you had to have housing attached to the train stations, and even though everyone says, no, every station has maybe not necessarily got to have, generally speaking, I wouldn't be messing with anybody in transportation about whether or not we can push it off to someone else. The rest of Sonoma County, all those transit station stops, have already adjusted their housing element to bring in the 2,200 units of low-income housing. So if we are all praying that everybody takes the train, good luck for us. But it looks like we're going to be in even more trouble with air pollution with people commuting, because if they're not happy with the train, don't feel like the train's taking them where they want to go, they'll be in a car like everyone else, because it's a matter of convenience or cost. And anybody who's lived on the East Coast knows you take a train, because you know what? Parking a car in Manhattan is impossible. If not extremely expensive, you'll just have something ripped off your car, which is what used to happen to me. So I wouldn't do Atherton, because there was a huge outcry from the community once they realized the 2,200 units were attached. And yes, it was allegedly in the smart train material that we got as voters, but you had to use a magnifying glass to see the fine print this was attached to, because it wasn't in any place where you could find it. So it's unfortunate. Whenever it's transit, be wary, be very wary, because they will have their iron fist upon us.
Thank you, Leslie. Eleanor.
I agree with Leslie. One of the issues is actually the smart train is a folly, and it all goes to the Transportation Authority and the One Plant Bay Area, which is trying again in the name of reducing greenhouse gases, that a train ideally would make us all jump on it and la-di-da, go to work and then come back. But many people need their cars to work. If you're a gardener, if you're a construction man, how many people have trucks? They can't go on the train, so that really limits a certain amount of people, which means you would have to have high-paying employers here in Novato to even have people ride the train. So it doesn't make sense. The smart station is just a extremely low priority. What we need to do is get different people on the transportation committees and smart committees to show this doesn't work. We need we need to get rid of diesel trucks and change those motors. We need a whole different looking at what we have in transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Let me stop for 1 second and ask Pam to assess the pile of questions you got and take a look at the clock and say, how many more should I ask from the list that we got earlier versus 3 or 4 more? 3 or 4, okay. Should I go with maybe 2 more? Okay. That's probably in that pile. Might be even be here. I'm going to turn to the city budget right now and ask about revenue streams. There's a quarter cent sales tax increase known as Measure F. Is a 5-year temporary tax that has a sunset to it, and if it is not extended past 5 years, what other sources of revenue would you propose to close the ongoing budget gap the city faces? Let's start with Madeline.
Well, when we passed, or when you passed, the 5-year, it's actually a half-cent sales tax. We really wanted to have that so it would bridge us over the next 5 years, so that we could come up with a sustainable plan around how to balance our revenues with our need for services. We were also hoping that in that 5 years, we would be seeing, by the end of that 5 years, an improvement in our economy. What we're about ready to do, starting this month, is to start to look at what that 5-year projection looks like and start figuring out what are some scenarios about how we're going to balance our revenues with our services. And then I think we're going to have to work very closely with you and many others in the community to figure out what is important to you. And if there is a desire to have more than we can afford, then we're going to have to identify some ways to generate revenue, whether that means continuing the tax, whether that means looking at other ways of funding services. But we're assuming that we're going to try to get our house in order without renewing that 5-year tax, and using those dollars now to reduce our liabilities, to do some things that really get us in good shape so that when that 5 years is up, we're stronger for it.
Thank you, Madeline. Eric.
Thank you. We currently have a $2.5 million structural budget deficit in Novato, and that gap is being closed by this half-cent sales tax. I think we need to start addressing the problem as soon as we can. We need to look at ways to generate reoccurring revenues for the city of Novato. We can look at, we always talk about development and sales tax and property tax and hotels and transient occupancy tax, and yeah, we can certainly utilize all of that. We need to be careful, though, that we don't allow our development decisions to be dictated by the fact that we need more revenue. We still need to think very smart and very strategic by the type of developments we have in Novato. I really think that we need to do a thorough analysis of all of the assets that are owned by the city, all of the parcels. You hear a lot, well, let's not sell one-time assets to plug an ongoing problem. But if you sell those one-time assets and you take that capital and you invest it in ways around the city that's going to give you reoccurring revenue, we're now starting to solve the problem. So I think that's another thing we need to look at. Finally, with regards to city offices, I know something's been talked about. If other options come forward, I'd be very interested in looking at those as well. Although we are going to save $650,000 by building downtown a year, it's going to cost $200,000 to maintain that building. So that becomes up to $12 to $15 million for a downtown building. Really isn't generating a lot of revenue for us in the long run. As much as we do need to get out of our lease, with a $2.5 million budget deficit before us, I think we need to make very wise decisions in this time.
Thank you, Eric. Jean.
Thank you. Well, we do have a $2.5 million structural deficit every year for the next 5 years. So, and the revenue stream from the tax, sales tax is $3 million every year for the next 5 years. So guess what happens the 6th year? We still got a big problem. So one of the strategies was to find a permanent home for our city offices. So right now we have an ongoing expense of about $650,000 a year. It will continue to rise if we continue to lease. The idea is to use one-time money to stop the outflow of the ongoing dollars. And as been said to my colleague on the right here, we'll save probably $400,000 a year that can be used. It's ongoing revenue that can be used for our ongoing expenses. We also need to look at, and we're having an actuarial analysis being done of our whole pension system and our full compensation. That's 80% of our budget. And we need to look at whether it's appropriate to pay down, use some of that tax increment to pay down some of our pension obligation, because we're paying 7 3/4% for that obligation. We cannot develop our way out of this problem. And we also are reviewing all our technology, see if we can deliver services smarter, and we're also looking at repurposing some of our buildings and see if we can get some partners. All in all, we've got some heavy work to do, and stay tuned.
Thank you, Jean. Leslie.
Whenever anybody says, what are your sources of revenue, and you're asking a government what they are, that's red alert to all of us coming out of our pockets, because they don't build anything that people buy. The services that they provide for us that we are looking for are police protection, a sense of safety in the community we live in, a feeling that the police are not understaffed, that they're not overworked. That's what we're looking for. So I would not be looking for revenues. What I would be looking for is, and I know we've cut the staff by 30% or some ridiculously horrible number. We're down to bare bones. But what we've left is all the management. And what the people want are the people who do the work, the actual everyday work. So I would hope that we could quit hiring consultants, that when we have a city project, we look at people who are here as our first source to do the project. Not somebody in the East Bay, not somebody in San Francisco, and yes, even if it means the RFP is just a little bit too expensive, the fact that they're here locally, that they live here locally, that they work here locally, means we would be self-sustaining instead of outsourcing ourselves out of a town.
Thank you. Eleanor.
Would you repeat the question again?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to. Measure F, if it's not extended past 5 years, what other sources of revenue would you propose to close the ongoing budget gap?
Well, I have to agree with some of the other people on saying, again, we'll need a plan, and we have to start now planning. I also agree with the others who say we must not build downtown city offices. We have other options. We can either cut the city office in half, the one they're proposing, for $6 million, even buy a place for $3 to $6 million. And we can also look at, because there is no plan for the historic buildings, which means the community house. That has to be decided, and nobody's talking about it. We have the homes on Sherman. We have the community house. That's the plan. So no office building should be downtown for $12 to $15 million and just to sit there for, and then it'll be vacant for almost 3-4 days a week. And if we do not build there, we have money to really look at what can we do with the other homes and the community house. Replace it or remodel it. We can also divide our city staff and save money into different areas. Public Works could go into Peeney's. That would help Peeney's, that area on the west side of Redwood Boulevard. So my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Jerome.
Proposition F was a little bit of a sleight of hand, because if you read the text of Proposition F, the first 4 items on it were police items. I have looked at the budget, and the budget doesn't produce 4 new police officers. It produces a half of a police officer for $3 million a year. We got a federal grant for $1 million that will give us 3 additional officers. A little bit of sleight of hand, but I understand that we have structural deficits. The only thing that's going to change the revenue stream in Novato is if the national economy picks up. The only way the national economy is going to pick up is if it's funded nationally. Locally, all we can hope for is 2 things. One is more jobs, and the other is that the jobs that are developed in Novato are given to legal, tax-paying American citizens. Because if they're here illegally and they're paid as day laborers, they pay no taxes. Legal workers pay taxes into the economy. We need to develop light commercial and retail around town, and that will help with more jobs. We also need to support the institutions we have now. My cobbler, Ernie Nuzionino, is in Novato. My hairstylist is Helen of Troy. My banker is in Novato. My dentist is in Novato. I go to restaurants at Hilltop, Garden, Ghirardelli, Marvin's, Wild Fox, Mills, and Chevy's. I use Bucksaw and Knowers. I go to Costco and Target. If we can get our people to shop in our town, that will help our sales tax revenues.
Thank you. Madeline, can you pass the, thank you. Madeline, go ahead.
I already answered.
Oh, you already answered that.
I know where it's all
right, so we're
a little punchy now.
Yeah, a little fatigue here. I'm going to take a question here from our audience here tonight. This will be for Eric first. It's on the subject of the Marin Energy Authority. I think there was just a lot of discussion, quite a bit of feedback about the opt-in versus opt-out. I would like to know a little bit more about how you feel about the opt-in option rather than being automatically included into MEA.
Great question. I would have opposed joining MEA, really for 2 reasons. First of all, currently MEA costs more than PG&E, and I could not in good conscience make a unilateral decision that would opt our residents into MEA knowing that it's cost more money. I believe in the economy we're in, we're very price sensitive. I don't believe that that would have been a wise choice. As a big of a believer as I am in clean energy, I would have liked to see some sort of guarantee that the price would be equal to or less than PG&E. The other main reason why the biggest concern I have is the power that PG&E has. PG&E still controls the transmission and distribution costs. but MEA controls the energy cost. So here's what PG&E can do. They can lower their rates by $1, and then they can increase their transmission and distribution rates by $1. So PG&E customers are still paying the same amount of money. MEA customers are now paying an extra $1 because they have to pay the transmission and distribution costs. Now, hopefully, the California Public Utilities Commission will keep a very keen eye on that and make sure that sort of stuff doesn't happen. But could it happen? Absolutely. So those are the two biggest concerns for me. I'm very excited about what Marine Clean Energy is doing. I think we have a little ways to go before I would be able to say I would absolutely opt in for that program.
Thank you, Eric. Jean?
Yes, I voted not to join MEA, not because I don't believe in clean energy and not because I don't want people to have a choice. I think it was set up poorly, set up by a legislature that decided that opt-out was the only way to make it viable. And so it's really up to the ratepayers to know consciously that they have to get out of this, and most people aren't paying attention. Because they've got their lives to lead and other things to do. I also felt we did hire a consultant for about $10,000 to determine if there were still risks to the city. We know that some of the risks have been handled and are no longer such, but there's still outstanding risks like bond capacity that may be reevaluated every 6 months. And these are bonds that would be necessary in case Marine Clean Energy failed and PG&E would have to take all the customers back. So those are unknowns. You also have the Marine Clean Energy run by elected officials that come and go, may or may not have the expertise in energy, and they are dependent on consultants to advise them as to what their options are and what prices to pay and all that kind of thing. I feel that our city needs to focus on our fiscal, facilities, and land use issues. We don't have the staff to keep an eye on this Marine Clean Energy. So I'm glad I voted the way I did.
Thank you, Jean. Leslie?
So this is an example of us deciding, not us Novato, just the state of California, that government is good at everything, including running utilities. So now that we're in, because we're in, what we need to do is actually have, I'm not kidding, ratepayer parties, Margaret Todd Center, bring in your form, 200 people in the room sitting at the tables, and we'll all collectively fill them out together if you choose not to belong. Because evidently it's very difficult. They don't seem to get the message. We love signing petitions in this town. We love our form of democracy and protest. And I say if we all get together and fill it out, at least it sends a message that we really did mean no. We don't need to have you tell us 5 different times, 5 different confused messages, so we did or didn't get in or out. And we know that if we did it there together, all together, that we are handing them in a packet, and somebody ought to pay attention because it's lots of people all at once. It seems that in Southern Marin, people who've tried have been very discouraged because it's so hard to get out. And so I would just say we really do let's do ratepayer parties, and if you don't want to do it, you got the choice now, get together with your neighbors and fix it.
Thank you, Leslie. Eleanor?
I'm one of the ones who really agree with having clean energy because we're going to get points later on that shows that we're interested in reducing greenhouse gases. And I'm going to show this picture again. This is the future, and it should be a diverse future. These children coming up need to have solar and and wind, how we can get rid of oil. And it's all about oil and plastics. And the more that we can get into this, the better it is. I am willing to pay that extra $1. I'm also willing to help those people who want to opt out. So 892-0128, and I will be at your house and I'll help you opt out. But I think it's a good thing. The person, Don Weiss, is a professional. They've hired 4 or 5 people professionally to work on this. It takes time, but the risks are lower right now, and I think it's a good thing for Novato. I think Martha Stewart would agree with me. Thank you. It's a good thing.
Thanks, Eleanor. Jerome?
My published prior opinion is that I believe in direct democracy whenever you can. What I had said previously is we should have had a referendum rather than having the city council decide on this. The referendum would have cost an additional $10,000 paid to the county to put the ink on the ballot, but we would have had a good sense of how the people in Novato actually feel about this. Me personally, I don't trust PG&E. I know for a fact that they've had an incestuous relationship with the California PUC for at least 2 and probably 3 decades. PG&E keeps promising things and not delivering. Their inspection criteria has been shown to be defective in San Bruno, and I don't want Redwood Boulevard blowing up because there's a line underneath it, 16-inch, 2 16-inch gas transmission lines.
Thank you, Jerome. Madeline?
Well, I think it was in 2009 that we voted last time on MEA. MEA was very new. It really wasn't clear whether there was a firewall between the city and MEA in terms of financial risk. So I was one of the 3 that voted not to join at that time. And we were told then that there would be an opportunity at a future date. So my feeling was, let's wait and see. Let's see whether this thing gets legs and whether it has a future. So we were asked by a number of our residents to reconsider. There was an offer for us to join by November 8th without having to pay a joining fee of $20,000 to $40,000. So I felt that we needed to offer people the opportunity, if they wanted to join, to join. The law is written so that you have to opt out. That is the way it's written. We know from speaking to others that there are ways to get the communication out, to let people know that they need to do their opt-out if they want to opt out. At this point, 10 of the 11 cities have joined, along with the County of Marin. Corte Madera is entertaining a vote on November the 2nd. In terms of our involvement, there will be 1 council member who will serve on the board. It is a JPA, and we don't anticipate that we'll have a lot of staff involvement. So that's where we are, and we still haven't decided as a city whether we will join, and that will come up this spring.
Thank you very much. We are reaching the end of our evening. I have more questions here. I'd love to just make you sit down for 3 or 4 more hours and just rapid fire. But I think we're going to be wrapping it up here. I think I'd certainly like to thank all the candidates for coming and being, number 1, willing to serve. And it's quite a sacrifice on your personal time. We know that, and serving is a very noble thing. We all appreciate it.